Welcome to the Leader More podcast. Our motive is to pass on what we've found helpful over the years through leading teams, running operations, and dealing with life's challenges. We hope you enjoy. So say again, how many did you have?
So two knees. Like, do we want surgeries? Like 2 knees and a bicep.
Yeah. So what with your knees? What was that?
A meniscus tear in each of the knees and a ruptured biceps tendon.
Okay. So they're the surgeries.
Yeah.
And then what other injuries then?
Shoulder capsule injury, an ankle, ATFL tear, which is the main ligament of the ankle, and my neck.
What happened there?
So I'll cut a very long story short, but I've got a bit of a history with osteophytes in my neck. Now, osteophytes are bone sparing of the neck, and people have bone spurs, in their knees and different portions of their back and their neck. And sometimes, if not aggravated, they're fine. They don't have any sort of adverse symptoms or effects or whatever. You can live a normal life with them. But in this event that I've had 10 or so weeks ago now, where I pretty much was face plant of the dirt, I've had an undisplaced fracture of the osteophyte on the neck. Now, the osteophyte is in the C5 level of the vertebrae, so it's not the vertebrae. I didn't crack or fracture the vertebrae. I've fractured the bone growth that's on the vertebrae. And it's one of those ones where, it's quite serious. It does need to be tended to. It needs to be mobilised, hence why I had to spend 8 weeks in a long aspen collar, which is otherwise known as one of the bigger neck braces. But the good news with that is that the fracture is undisplaced. There's nothing floating. It's not near the spinal cord. And I have had scans which have outlined that my spinal cord is intact and fine, and no blemishes on it. So that's great, but it is one of those injuries where you have to do the right thing, and I did.
And what I would say, like, pretty frustrating, right, is like, hey, there's nothing wrong with my actual, let's say my vertebrae, nothing wrong with my spinal cord. I've got this growth but I'm in this goddamn brace for how many weeks?
It was 8 weeks.
8 weeks.
8 weeks
in a
and
brace.
2 days in a full brace, 24/7. The only time I could take it off was when I had to replace the pads after a shower. So I had to shower with it, had to sleep with it as well.
Able to drive?
No, couldn't drive.
No driving.
So to answer your question, it was an 8 weeks. It was quite a hard 8 weeks. I had to rely on a number of different people to drive, to ferry myself around to different appointments or to work. For example, I had a colleague drive me to and from work. Thank God.
Yeah.
Like a lot of us, we live quite individual lives, right? And there's a lot of things, hopping in the car to go and pick up a loaf of bread from the shops, like I couldn't do that. And it was difficult in the sense that whilst I'm incredibly fortunate to have a very supportive partner and family, it felt quite deflating and disappointing that I had to constantly, rely on them. And burden them. It's not a really nice feeling. Quite a helpless feeling.
I could just imagine like how frustrating that would be, is that, it's probably more, not precautionary, but there is an element of that, right? And it's like I'm getting treated like it's this super, super serious thing, which it is my spine. I get it. But yeah, and then all the stuff that goes with that.
Well, correct.
And even just wearing one of those braces, right, mobility-wise and sleeping-wise, I don't know how I would go sleeping in something like that. But then walking out in public and then just, going out to dinner or something.
That was part of the test, really. It was difficult. I had to get over it. There was a few moments throughout that 8 weeks where I really had a choice where I could, let this get the better of me and, flip the desk over and be hard done by. Or I can go, all right, well, what can I do? I can go for a walk to the coffee shop. I can give my mate a call. I could get up and make myself breakfast or lunch. I can do that. For 8 weeks, and it was a mutual friend of ours that did say to me that, you know, a lot of people, they'd kill to be able to be told you've got 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And I guess I kind of shifted away from that and going, look, all right, it's not great, but it's 8 weeks and I'm going to do it right. I'm not going to do anything silly. I'm going to make sure that I do this, you know, give this the best shot that I can. And I did. And, you know, it wasn't great. Like, it wasn't fantastic. It was difficult. Lots of reliance on people. And, but, you know, I am happy that I can look back and go, I did the right thing. And, you know, we had that review, the last review and the last scan, and it was, you know, a great result. The injury had healed. Now, was there, to your point, a period or a thought where maybe it could have been precautionary? Possibly, maybe, but ultimately I'm under care of, you know, a team of specialists, whoever that might be, and they're not going to be taking this, you know, lightly, I guess, given the spine.
They're not doing it for no reason. Yeah.
Correct. And so I'm not a spinal specialist. So I might know a little bit about the human body. I might think I know about my body, but I'm the sort of person that if somebody smarter than me gives me some solid advice, I'm probably going to take it. So yeah, I look back on it and I learned some lessons, but
test your patience.
Correct. But again, it just falls back to, you know, I snap straight out of that when I think 6 weeks, people would love to hear that. Yeah. So I'll be okay.
What was it that got you to that point where you were saying that, you know, you're flipping a desk or becoming a bit of a victim? Like what was, can you remember like what that was that sort of...
We collectively live a pretty active lifestyle, right? So that was taken away. I pretty much can't leave the house unless, you know, somebody drives me somewhere. Right. I can socialize, I can sit at a table, I can do all that stuff, but I can't get up, I can't get in the car to go to the gym, I can't go to work. And that can sometimes feel quite isolating. But, you know, again, I've got a choice. I can sit in that and I can maybe blame or maybe find it difficult or feel a bit sorry for myself. Or I can go, oh, well, what can I do? What do I do? I can give my dad a call. I could catch up with my family or invite somebody over. I could go for a walk, or and there's a lot, you could do lots of stuff, right?
But you're right. It's easier said than done, right?
Correct.
Okay, I'm 4 or 5 weeks into this. It's dragging. I'm hangry at the end of the day or something. Your mood's low. I've got this shit. Something's reminded me of something. You know, there's things just when we're fit and healthy normally that piss us off and get us to a point where we start to sort of...
Again, I don't like sounding like I was, you know, in the worst possible case, because I wasn't and I'm not. But, you know, there was a lot of change. Like, my partner and I just bought a house that needed some work done to it. Just started a new job right before I hurt myself. You know, actually I didn't even start work yet. I was finishing up my notice period. You know, I was in the middle of a rugby league season. I had all this change happening around me, and then this happens. So it was difficult. It was tough. But again, what can I do about it? There's not a lot I can control at this point. I can sit in it and feel sorry for myself, or I can, you know, start thinking about what I can do to be proactive. And that's a lot of that's what I really try. And I'm not perfect at it, but that's what I try and do in those sorts of high pressure situations. Or what can I control right now? And, you know, this isn't rocket science, and there's a lot of people that do the same thing. It's you know, widely reported. But that probably helped me a little bit more than it usually would, particularly in that time of stress and I guess change and helplessness, I guess.
I just think that topic there, Smitty, is like easier said than done in regards to like when you're, you know, reading something or researching something or watching a video, and it's like in these situations, you got to focus on what you can control and be proactive and all this. But when you're in it,
correct,
bit different story. And like, understandably, you get to a point where it's like, that's not what I want to do. Everything in my bones is telling me I want to do something else, and I should be the victim. and you got to drag yourself out of it.
And it's funny because that sort of mentality applies to work. It can apply to sporting teams. It can apply to interpersonal relationships or family relationships. When you're, when the pressure's on, and whether it's trauma, that's a pretty big one, or when there's I guess a bit of adversity, it's quite easy to jump into that trap. And it's quite ironic that in the role that I'm in, that can happen when you're dealing with people who have gone through some sort of adversity or trauma. You really have to do your best to make a concise decision. But when emotions are running hot, it's very difficult, whether it be sitting behind your work desk or out on a rugby league field or preparing for a game in a couple of days. It's very difficult.
Probably something we should mention, like all these injuries aren't just because you're a wild man out at night stirring up some trouble. You play a bit of sports, you play rugby league, you have done for forever, since you were a young kid,
Yeah. It was quite ironic how I fell into the sport. I was just at my primary school. I think I was 5 years old, and a mate of mine at the time said, "This is what I do. I play rugby league for the local team, and you should come down and try it." And I said, "Oh yeah, good, sounds great. I'll tell my mum and dad, and I'll let you know." And I went back to my mum and dad that afternoon and said, "Look, I want to play rugby league." And little did I know, unbeknowingly, my dad used to play rugby league for, in Western Australia and in Northern Territory, probably from a social sort of level. And my grandfather played in Newcastle, which is where his side of the family's from. So it was a little bit ironic, and I think it took him a little bit by surprise from what I was told, that that's the sport that I wanted to play, let alone in Perth in an AFL-dominated state. But yeah, I've obviously played ever since. It's provided me with, I guess, a good outlet and some opportunities, and thankful to be able to learn and resonate off a number of different players just like me, coaching staff and leaders. And yeah, look, it's something that I've seen as I guess an outlet that I can use socially, but also really develop some good social skills that can translate into a number of different areas.
Well, just like on that injury point of view, like all your injuries you're just sort of discussing, if you had a choice, you'd rather not. But it does put you into those type of situations where you're tested physically and mentally to be able to deal with situations that just come up, right? And it's, how am I going to deal with that? And then, like you said, it relates then to work. Like I could imagine, that injury with your neck happens as you're finishing up in a role. So like the guilt you feel that you can't work out your notice period as much as what you would like. And I don't want to take any sick leave, and I don't want to then stuff around my new employer, and like all those,
for sure.
Like all those situations on the back of getting something that's not ideal.
Correct.
But you've got to deal with that and build up the resilience to be able to work through that.
Well, yeah, and it's like it'd be like a lot of people. Like you want to work hard. It's not just me. It's people really want to make a good impression. They want to go to work. They want to make a good impression at work. They want to do the things that is required of them, and that's what I was wanting to do. But that was obviously delayed, not denied, but it was delayed. Yeah. And so yeah, that was difficult. That was a whole nother sort of period that I had to go through, and thankfully now resolved, and I'm
back to normal.
I'm behind the desk, which is great. But yeah, it was definitely a testing period, but yeah, thankfully in the rearview mirror.
So sport, rugby league, you play any other sports when you're growing up? Or?
I did. So I had and I still do have the same group of friends to this day. I have a lot of friends that are diehard AFL fans and players. You can't escape it in Western Australia, and it's a sport that I appreciate. It's obviously not my sport.
What position would you play, you reckon?
Well, here's the thing. So I did play when I was 14 and 15, and back then I was able to play on both Saturday and Sunday, so they weren't clashing. So I'd play rugby league on a Saturday, and I'd play Aussie rules on a Sunday with my schoolmates. In terms of where I'd play position, anywhere you could probably hide me.
Hide you?
I wasn't a very good player. Put him in the forward pocket and just hope he doesn't touch the ball. I think I was there for my tackling, which is something that I did quite frequently playing rugby league. But for me, that was, I wasn't very good, but I did it because, I love my mates and I want to do what they're doing. And it was an opportunity that I could maybe learn a new skill or even a level of appreciation for the sport, really. Ultimately there was a time where I had to make a decision to choose between one or the other.
Yeah.
Obviously I chose rugby league because that was the sport I was brought up with, because they conflicted. I think once you turn a certain age group, they were both on the same days or there was training on the same nights, etc.
Forced to make a decision.
So I made the decision, and obviously I believe I chose the right one. AFL was fun. We had a coach, which was my mate's dad, and that was probably half the reason I really wanted to play, because he was a personal trainer, he was a psychologist, he was very good at what he did, and he was a very passionate guy, and he wanted to translate that into a number of 14 and 15-year-olds, and I was really keen to do that.
Why do you think? What was that?
Why is in...
Yeah, why did that interest you, like with what he was about?
I think I just looked up to him, Greenie. I think he was he was a guy that was passionate, very fit, very strong, and he wanted to bring out the best of 14 and 15-year-old boys.
Yeah.
And a lot of us were just high school kids, pretty average sort of life, and this was sort of a good outlet to go, we can train hard, we can learn some skills, we can deal with some adversity, we can, I guess he delicately gave a bunch of 14 and 15-year-olds, I guess, an idea or an importance to strive for being the best. And that was really good. Sacrifice, dedication at 14 and 15-year-olds in a delicate way. It was something that I wanted to be a part of. And that kind of helped me probably go back to rugby league and understand things like the effort and attitude that's required to be able to be a good, not even just a good athlete, but a good teenager.
Well, it's I'm thinking the same thing when you're saying that, is that you look up to professional sports people, right? And you go, oh, I want to do that, and that's amazing, all that sort of thing. But like I pick up from what you're saying, is it's more about how he carried himself and what he was role modeling, not necessarily had he played professional sport or not. Like that wasn't anything to do with it. It wasn't because, he played for, I don't know, he played for West Coast back in the day or any of that crap. It was more about just how he carried himself. Yeah, like that was admirable. He showed.
And the way that he portrayed that was that he was invested. He was invested in his team. They weren't the Freo Dockers. They were a bunch of 14 and 15-year-old high school kids. But he was invested. He wanted to bring them along the journey.
You could tell he cared.
Yeah. It's going to be, we're going to lose or we're going to have some sort of adversity, but that's okay because, we're a team and that's part of it. We're going to be all right. And I'm going to teach you along the way on how to be a good footy player and a good team member. But yeah, I've been fortunate to have a number of sort of coaches like that. Again, one of those things that translates to working life and relationships and, just being able to utilize those skills.
I think that's a really interesting subject, is like, not focusing on what someone has necessarily done or achieved, because like you can put in all, like you hear people all the time, people who have made it, so to speak, I work hard. Well, everyone works hard if they want to make it, right?
Sure.
So there's lots of timing, there's lots of luck, there's lots of different things that need to fall in place for you just putting in effort and hard work to get you to a point where those things can come into play,
Correct.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not to discount hard work, because it's the foundation, right?
Sure.
But it's not the given just because you work. People make it. Why? Because they work harder than everyone else? Really?
Well, I guess those micro skills, especially at that age, are very important. And look, I'm in no means an expert coach or anything like that. But, what I do know is that it's a real delicate age. And, I can't see any negative in teaching those sorts of values and discipline and, I guess, skills that teenagers can utilize to effectively set themselves up for their late teens and early 20s
compared to the alternatives.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah,
which may be a little bit more appealing with whether it be different lifestyles that are around.
Yeah, possibly. So I ultimately gave football away because of the clash. went back to playing rugby league. Fortunate enough to be in a few state sides along the way.
Talk to me about that. Like, did you have state sides in junior years?
Yeah, 15s actually missed out.
Okay. How did that feel?
Yeah, difficult. That was probably the first time where probably wasn't good enough, or I was told that I wasn't good enough. So yeah, it sucked. Looking back in hindsight, it's possibly what I needed. Definitely a lesson in it. You know, when you're 15, you probably don't see it that way, or let alone 18 or younger in any event. There's been lots of times where I probably wasn't good enough, but that's all right. Like, that's
more how you respond to that.
Yeah, it's fine. You can try and sit in it, or you can go, all right, well, let's be proactive instead and figure out what I can do. Can I, leave it all on the floor and pick up something else? Can I get better? Can I train harder? Can I look internally? Very hard to do at that sort of transitional age, being a teenager, but that was fine. There was lots of other stuff that I could have done at 15 or 16.
So you kept at it?
Kept at it, played 2 or 3 years in the under-18 system in the Western Australian side, and played tours with a number of great rugby league players in the senior men's team, and that was great. I thought I was okay. I didn't think I was the best. I play rugby league because it gives me a sense of purpose. It lets me contribute to something with friends. It picks up my social skills, and it creates a bit of discipline where, if I don't provide some sacrifice and dedication, I might miss the mark. And that's something that I really enjoyed, I guess, putting in the forefront of my mind. It helped me, get up and go to the gym, or realize that, I should probably do some running today, or, maybe I should focus more on my recovery because, if you don't, you might break down. It taught me a lot of that stuff, and played with a lot of really good, talented players, and still have to this day, and learnt a lot off them. So I've been quite fortunate.
Seeing you play and having a bit to do with you over the course of your sort of sporting sort of life, it's I would say your key attributes, right? Your effort, your aggressiveness. And like when you say, I chose, rugby league over Aussie rules, it's like, I don't think you would have lasted probably too long in Aussie rules with, with the constraints that they have on just going hard. And you think about those things and those attributes, and obviously there's a lot more than that. But, the main ones that always come up are talent and speed and what they're able to do. And then your body size, not being super tall in the position that you play. Back in the day, in the 70s and 80s, that was the norm, as, your type of build in that sort of, in the forward second row, lock, that type of area. But these days, it's all tall, rangy guys, right?
Missed out on that.
Yeah, which is a little bit different. I look at the stuff that you bring, and I like that. I love that effort. I love the aggressiveness, and like you said, how you carry yourself and those role models from that point of view. Like, I think that's your reliance on that, and not just what's been given to you. But that's cool.
Yeah, I think when I'm now a little bit later, I guess, in my park football career, those are the things that I really try and hone in on is who you are off the field as well. Probably struggled a little bit with that, or maybe didn't give it enough importance when I was younger, which is probably normal. I think that's something that I've learned from coaches, and even the coach that I had when I was 15 to the ones that I've had recently, even yourself as a coach. It's very important, equally as important, to be a contributing member off the field, or a good person rather than, being the best on the field. And I think indirectly, and whilst he might not enjoy me saying this, I think my dad had a little bit to do with that too. Because I was obviously, when you're 18 or in your teens, you're trying these sorts of sports and into these sorts of systems, it can indirectly or directly put a lot of pressure on you, just naturally, right? In a developmental age where there's a lot on the line, a lot of kids, and probably myself maybe struggled a little bit to handle that. I think my dad indirectly was a good figure in making me understand, which I probably more appreciate now, is that whilst the 19-year-old didn't want a bar of it, there is more to life than this. You can do a lot, and he didn't say it directly, but from the way that he spoke about it, whenever I said, oh, this didn't happen, or this didn't work out well today, or we lost the game, or whatever it might be, it was always a bit of a nonchalant, well, that's all right. Doesn't matter too much. Like, that's all right.
I could imagine
when you're in the heat of the moment.
Does this fucking bloke care? What is he on about?
But now, on reflection, I kind of actually understand what he's trying to say is that, look, just because football might not work out doesn't mean that you can't, hang out with your partner or be a good person or develop a new hobby or, just do all these things that you're actually, that are awesome. And he didn't say that. But thinking back about it, I think maybe that's how he kind of took his career. Was that if he wasn't going to be a footy player, that's fine. He'll find something else that makes it fun.
Well, I find that as a parent now, right? And I'm sure with your dad is probably the same thing. He probably knew the exact words he could say, but getting it across in that way, albeit the message doesn't get through straight away, because that's the hard thing. Like, you want to help your kids, you want to do all this stuff, right? And you want to give them everything, but sometimes you got to figure it out, because that's where we've learned the most, right? Is that you figure it out. So imagine from his point of view, it's like, I can sympathise with him, I can this and I can that, and
possibly, or I've just got it completely all wrong. But that's how I've interpreted it anyway.
No, it's funny, and I think in society, like, you think kids growing up is like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's not who do you want to be. Yeah. It's like, what do you want to be? And just that simple thing. It's just like, well, there's no doubt. And then like people that you obviously see through, TV or have made a name for themselves that are famous because they are at somewhere. It's not because necessarily who they are as people, it's what they're doing.
Correct.
So there's like this emphasis on it. And I like the fact of that, like the, who, not what.
As I, approach my 30s, and I'm 30 now, I understand that it's not the be-all, end-all. Don't get me wrong, we all want to be champions and we all want to be the best that we possibly can, and I don't think we should lose sight of that as a goal. But, it's important to look at who you are holistically and not put yourself in a box about, I guess, which can lead to obsession or unnecessary pressure.
Well, you can always control acting like a champion, but you can't always control being a champion, right? Like, fair thing, because like I was saying before, it's like you can put all the effort in the world into it. You can work hard. You can, put everything on the line. You can sacrifice everything. But if there's a few things off, whether that be timing, whether that be people believing in you, whether it be coaches at the time, whether it be whatever it is, it's not going to happen.
And I'm sure there's a number of different athletes, including, if you want to call us that have been in that position before. It's not uncommon.
Yeah.
So,
well, who am I? Yeah. And where's your identity when it falls over? It's all well and good when you make it.
Well, yeah.
And that's why I love talking about like stuff like this that you're talking about, is like, someone who has made it. It's like, well, I reckon people like you have got more to add because it hasn't worked out. So, well, okay, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
Do I just cry about it, or do I do something else, Correct.
It's a funny thing. And, again, back to what we were talking at the start around, I guess, having the blinkers on when when you're emotional or when you're around trauma, you don't see all that stuff. But realistically, when you look at it globally, you've got another 50 so years here, or could be 10 so years, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. That's a lot of time, a lot of time that you can do a lot of things. Again, hard to see in hindsight, hard to see in the heat of the moment. But I guess, like a lot of people, when you mature a little bit, I think that sort of method of thinking comes to the surface a little bit more than maybe somebody that's a little bit younger. Or
okay, sport, and on that topic of what do I want to do when I grow up, all that sort of stuff, like you ended up following like a sports science sort of career?
So I ended up, whilst I was still in, I guess, my university years, I undertook a exercise and sports science degree. Again, probably because what I did, I figured out what would I like to do. I like sport. That's all I've done since I can remember. And so would I be good at it? Yep. Did I think too much about what I could do with it? Probably not, but decided I'll figure that out once I've graduated. Yeah. Potentially could lead to further study or another career path or whatever that might be. But for the purposes of what I'm going to do now, I'm going to pursue this path. It was, I think, when do people start university? From about 18, I ended up deferring for a little bit to go and play or do a pre-season in Newcastle. Realised, obviously, back to what we were saying before, that, I was probably not going to last there. So I ended up coming back and continuing my studies, graduated, and I ended up going into further studies and completing a diploma of clinical exercise physiology. Now, with these sorts of degrees, there's a number of, like lots of degrees actually, you have to complete a certain number of practicum hours in a number of different disciplines or areas, which are, specialists in their own way. And that obviously is designed to help you understand what you'd like to do. What stream would you like to do? Give you a bit of an idea as well as a student about what you can do with your career once you graduate. I completed a high number of practicum hours in clinic, which is exactly how it sounds. And I realised it probably wasn't for me. And I guess once I graduated, or when I was probably a few months out from graduation, again, like a lot of universities do, they have open days or they have people coming in from different areas or specialists coming in talking about what they do, who they are, what they do, what are some of the things that they do on a day-to-day basis. And I ended up sitting in on a guy who, funnily enough, was completing practicum with throughout my studies in a clinical setting.
Yeah.
He ultimately wasn't doing that anymore. He was working in the insurance industry, and it was essentially a corporate role, completely different to, hands-on clinical work that your normal exercise physiologist or physiotherapist would complete.
Yeah.
This is more so along the lines of case management, injury management, return to work, being a bit of an advocate or an insurer for a portfolio of clients who take out insurance with yourself. So he told me a little bit about what he does. It was quite interesting in the sense that it appeared as though that it was something new every day for him, a little bit different to what my experience was in a clinic. And I said, look, here's my resume. I don't think I graduated yet. I said, look, here's my resume. Hit me up in November. I would love to catch up and just know a little bit more. And I guess at the time we were nearing the graduation, and by nearing, I think we were probably halfway through our diploma of 12 months. And a mate of mine completing the same degree in my class, we pretty much came together and go, okay, well, we're probably not the smartest people here. We weren't terrible. We were going to graduate. We were going to be okay. But we were running through the numbers and we realised, okay, there's 12 people here. Everyone's going to want a job. We're probably going to have to do something about it. So before we even finished the degree, we were having job interviews, and it was quite funny looking back. A lot of it was over the phone. We were applying through the same sort of areas, similar to the gentleman, the stream that the gentleman came in and spoke about. I just comically remember that I've had to tell a lot of these people that just before we continue, I don't graduate for another 6 months. I hope that's okay. So look, and for the most part it was. And anyway, this gentleman got in touch with me before, I think it was September or August, and our graduation was in November. He said, look, there's an opening up. We can probably get you in start of next year. And I ultimately got accepted for a contract before I graduated, which was pretty good.
How good?
Took a lot of pressure off, that's for sure. And in a tight job market and a degree where it probably has a little bit of a limit on what you can do with it. So fast forward, I've spent a few years in case management through an insurer. Cut a very long story short, it's pretty much managing a portfolio of clients, managing their workers' compensation insurance policy from a financial standpoint in saving them money, but also return to work, so getting their employees back to work as quickly as possible. High-end clients that maybe it could be a 3-man plumbing business. And I guess the good part about that, and it's still to this day quite a difficult job. It's quite laboursome. It's a job where you can just keep working if you really want to. You can work 24 hours a day because there's always something to do. It's it's definitely a role that I guess for some people, if you really like it, fantastic. If you don't, it's pretty easy to see that it's not for you. You're either going to be there for a little while or you might not last as long as what you originally envisioned. I stuck it out, and I guess where I wanted to go was to be, instead of the insurer, I wanted to be the representative of the company who would deal with the insurer. And that's where I found myself now, through a couple of different, I guess, organisations over the years. So I guess the good thing for me is that I kind of have a bit of an idea about how it works from both sides of the coin. I've really enjoyed it. I guess one of the bigger things that I've enjoyed from doing that is the ability to build relationships and contacts with people. You're dealing with a number of different stakeholders, and each with their own, I guess, end goal or piece of the puzzle in getting an injured employee back to work from, the beginning of their injury or the start of their injury to complete resolution, and off you go.
Yeah. Mate, I like how you said, I went to Newcastle for a pre-season and it didn't work out, so I went da-da-da-da-da. There seems to be this thing with you that you are very good at being organised and prepared and thinking ahead, whether it be organising to get yourself a job before your graduation. Was that easy to get over that? Like, hey, it's not going to work out for me. You obviously, you went...
There was a bit to it.
Yeah, I bet. You went across to Newcastle, you tried to follow a passion, a dream, I'd imagine, and essentially get to a realisation that that's not going to happen.
Yep, for sure. So
did you struggle with that? Or was that like, no, okay, that's cool, I'm moving forward?
Yeah, so I went over to Newcastle and stayed with my grandparents for about 4 or 5 months to complete a pre-season with a development team. Ultimately, it didn't work out. I didn't spend too much talking about why or thinking about why it didn't work out. I think, and this is completely from a realistic point of view, I probably wasn't good enough. If I was, I'd probably still be there. But I learned a lot from it. I played with some really good players. I was in, I guess, a good system where I learned a lot that I could bring back home. I had a girlfriend at the time, which probably could have complicated things even more. Going from a city in Perth to Newcastle, which is a city in itself, but definitely a different dynamic. Yep. It was difficult. And I don't think I'm the only, or I was the only 19-year-old or 18-year-old kid to feel like that. People go through it every day.
So you got cut. How'd you get cut? What happened?
It was effectively told that I wouldn't be offered a further contract or I guess an upgrade into their 2000 to their under-20s team. So I had a couple of options. I could have stayed there and played in the Newcastle competition. Now that's a very good comp. It's probably one of the better comps in Australia in terms of park football, which would entail, things like getting a job, trying to understand if I could branch over to another university to continue my study. And you know what, after a little bit of deliberation, I thought, I'm just going to come home. I'm going to come home. I'm going to continue my study. I'm going to join up to another club. I'm going to move clubs when I get back to Perth. And go from there.
Move forward.
I was 19 at the time. I guess at the time I was thinking there might be more opportunities. There might not, but there might be more opportunities. So we don't have to think too far ahead. Just go home, reassess, get stuck into your studies, finish your degree, and then go from there.
So your degree, you chose what interested you, what you enjoyed.
Yep.
you didn't have, okay, I want to be this. It was more just a subject that you liked.
Exactly. And I find it, I found it quite difficult to understand what I really wanted to do. And I think that still is quite prevalent in today's society around, these 17, 18-year-olds, being asked to tell people what they want to do when they're older. You talk to people that are even older than me and they often joke about it and they go, I still don't know what I want to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's difficult. I've got a sister who's decided to take a gap year and travel and do a working holiday overseas. And, me looking at that thinking, that's a very smart thing to do. Because one thing that I didn't really understand is that you don't necessarily need to be successful. And success is a very broad scale. It's a number of different meanings to a number of different people. You don't necessarily have to enroll straight into uni after, in my belief, after high school, to keep on the path of success. And that's something that I maybe didn't think about. All my other mates were going to uni or getting trades. And I just felt, well, geez, I better make a decision now.
Yeah.
When in hindsight, again, this is a personal point of view, but I feel as though that you don't need to necessarily make that decision if you're not ready to yet. And I could probably have a guess that there's a number of different kids that maybe wouldn't be ready for it.
Well, I think it's most people, right? And it's sort of like, I'm going to choose a profession that I've never done. It's going to cost me a lot of money to study. I'm throwing all my eggs into this basket of what I want to do and putting everything on the line for it. Or, hey, I do know that I have an interest in something and I'm going to start there. And that's all I need to know, because the rest of it can work itself out as I go, right?
Yep.
Which is, you think probably more common sense to think about it that way. And that's where gap years come in. Correct. You tell a parent, I'm going to go on a gap year. They go, what? What are you doing with your life? Don't waste away.
But it's like
it gives you time to understand what you want to do, right?
Correct. And, gap years, again, they look different. They probably look a little bit different to different people. But, you can take a gap year and work at a supermarket. You could take a gap year and work up north. You could work anywhere, really. But I guess the thing that you'll get out of that is dealing with people, figuring out what you like, figuring out what you don't like. And then that's probably going to help you shape a bit of an idea about, what are the things you're good at? What are the things you can't tolerate? Rather than just getting out of year 12 and I guess trying to figure that stuff out without having those experiences. Don't get me wrong. Again, there's people that, that do know what they want to do. That, they've got a good idea, or they've got a family member, or they've got some exposure to a certain vocation, and that's what they want to do. And that's
cool.
That's awesome. Good. That's really good. You've skipped a few steps. But yeah, for the ones that don't,
which I think is the vast majority of people.
Yeah, and I think that's normal. I really think that's normal. So yeah, I decided to complete studies that were aligned to what interests me. And
so sports science, and then that led into exercise physiology, right?
Yep.
And the difference between that and physiotherapy, why exercise physiology? Well,
so an exercise physiologist can prescribe exercise, where I think there's another skill set that physiotherapists can do that exercise physiologists can, and that's why there's two different degrees. That's pretty much to a T. There's levels to it, which we could probably talk to the cows come home about, but that's why they're differing in disciplines.
Okay.
In what I do, effectively now it's one of the requisites is an allied health background for injury management. Typically, or experience, it depends where you go and who you ask. But for the roles that I've applied for, it's an allied health background. So that can be nurses, that can be occupational therapists, that can be physios and exercise physiologists as well. But to answer your question, that's, I guess, the difference between the two.
Yeah. And you knew that you didn't, how did you know that you didn't want to, I suppose, practice as an exercise physiologist, like that clinical sort of side of things?
Yeah, I guess this is my experience, so I don't mean to in any way degrade the discipline at all. It was just something
that you wanted to do.
Yeah, just something that I didn't really find interest in. It was a little bit monotonous for myself, and
Just like client after client type thing.
Yeah, exactly right. And look, that's the nature of the role, though. I get that. Like, that's kind of what an exercise physiologist or a physio can potentially do. And I've obviously just branched away into a different stream.
Yeah. That's a guy that come in and sort of spoke to you at the uni, right? You know, you had a relationship with him already. You were sort of saying you'd done some practice. So it was probably a trusted voice to an extent. You
Exactly right. 100%. And you know, he because of the relationship that we build in completing that prac, he was, you know, more than willing to offer a helping hand, because he, you know, sat in my chair in class, figuratively speaking, you know, a year or two before me. So he knew about it. He knew about the tough decisions possibly, and he wanted to give me a helping hand. You know, and it's a contact that I, you know, still speak to on a weekly basis, just about.
That's cool.
You know, about career or you know, we've actually worked at a professional level, given the way that our jobs are kind of structured now. So yeah, it's a contact that I'm, you know, quite fortunate to still have.
Yeah, case management.
Yep.
Going into, you know, working with an insurer and working with different people like that. Like, how did you find that? Like, was that different to what you initially thought it would be like?
You're dealing with a lot of people, so you're going from, you know, a classroom to effectively the front line, where you're dealing with, you know, a number of different people, whether it be an employer or a doctor or a physio or any sort of allied health stakeholder that's involved in a return to work or an injury that's happened at the workplace.
And you just dealt with the return to work?
Yep.
That's
effectively, you're just coordinating it.
And you're working with, I suppose, the contact at the different, I suppose, client, or are you working with the injured person
both.
As well?
Yeah, both. The role entails both.
As well as medical professionals.
Correct. Making sure that everyone's on the same page.
Okay.
You know, when somebody hurts themselves at work, as you could probably guess, the first thing they go, well, what happens to my money? What happens? Who's going to pay for my surgery? Who's going to pay for the physio or the gym membership that I got to pass? Or who's going to tell my boss? Or who's going to, all these questions. And, you know, you could.
And then from the client, it's like, well, how long, how much is it going to cost me?
Yeah.
You know, all that sort of stuff as well.
Correct. Yep.
And conflicting as well. Like, thinking about it, you got all these medical practitioners probably saying that it's going to take this period of time. And then you've got, you know, well, the injured person, you know, depending upon the person, might want it to be longer or shorter, right? You'd like to think shorter. They obviously don't want to be injured. It's unfortunate. But then the employer too wanting it to be shorter. So like, you got these conflicting priorities that you're in the middle of.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, the thing, and that kind of translates to my current role as well, which we can talk about in a little while, but whilst there might be conflicting expectations between different stakeholders, there is an act, there is legislation that you need to abide by, and that's something that I've had, I guess, a bit of exposure to and have, you know, a fair understanding of it. Ultimately, it's guided by the medical evidence on hand. So if we've got a medical report saying this X, Y, Z, then that's what we've got to work for, irrespective of what the boss thinks, irrespective of what the worker thinks. That's just what we have to do.
Yeah. That's easier said than done.
Correct,
right?
correct. Because that can in turn create frustration to people who don't understand that there's a legislation, or especially when, you know, emotions are involved.
Well, get me out of this neck brace I've been in for 8 weeks.
Yeah, correct. No, I feel fine. Why have I been told that I've got to stay in it for another 4 weeks? I feel good, right? Which is something that ran past my mind a few times. So yeah, I guess it's a tricky one, because you're trying to adhere to the legislation, but you're also dealing with people with emotions.
Yeah.
With valid emotions.
Yeah.
You can probably see what I mean by you can literally work for 24 hours if you wanted to.
Is that tricky, handling all that?
I struggled with it when I first started, but, you know, with advice and guidance from people above me, you know, you really develop your idea of what's urgent and what's not urgent. You know, ultimately, people are there. It's just their job. It's just a job, right? It's a means to put food on the table, and, you know, that you don't need to take on anything further than that. It's a little bit unrealistic, and you know, some people see it differently, and You know, they're happy to work 12-hour days and whatever, but I really struggled with it at the beginning to take that away. You know, I struggled to leave work at work.
Yeah.
But now I'm getting a little bit more mature. You know, maybe that could be due to the way that I work or my periodization.
Yeah, but probably training too. Like you think about it, like you're doing sports science and exercise physiology, and I get that it's not necessarily that's what you do to become a case manager, right? But you learn about all this technical stuff about the body and all that sort of stuff. I bet they're not telling you how to deal with a 50-year-old guy who's just gone through a traumatic injury, and you have to tell him that he's not going to get what he necessarily wants, whether that be getting back to work or whatever, right? I bet there's no training for that. Like you said, you're learning that on the job, and that's probably the harder thing. It's not black and white. I can't look at a textbook and go, oh, okay, well, this injury means this.
Correct.
I've got to deal with some fella that's...
And that's because that's the whole emotion thing.
Yeah.
And, you know, you're right, there's no manual for that. You know, there's managers and there's, you know, which is
resources
where
and
I'm
support.
at now, and there's support and there's resources now that can assist where needed. But you're right. How did I learn? I just jumped straight into it. And, you know, was there phone calls or things that maybe I could have done a little bit better? Maybe, but it's a very difficult thing and it's a difficult role. And I guess back to the point where that could be one of the reasons why some people go, this is really great and I love this challenge, or some people go, you know what, might not be for me.
It's confronting.
Yeah, it is. It's difficult, but it's rewarding at the same time, right? You literally have an opportunity to help people. And that's probably one of the reasons why I stayed. It's because I've been with, you know, this person and I've called them the day after they've hurt themselves, and I've also called them the day where they're back at work doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I helped all along the way, and that's great. And that's the goal, right? You know, to have a focus on the person to help them get back to what their livelihood effectively is.
Yeah. Those situations where you're dealing with all those different stakeholders, what have you found works best for you? Like over that time, like what have you found that just works to be able to make that process and that traumatic time or that, you know, annoying time work well? Like what were those things?
Look, I think you kind of peel it back to understand what are the major components of this role. It's to provide people with information. You know, it's to make sure and to provide people with options. You know, you've just hurt yourself. Here's who I am. This is my role, and this is what I can do for you. We are bound by legislation, so that has with its certain constraints. However, this is what your options are. I feel as though when people have that, I don't know, you know, how I operate is that if I understand my options at the very beginning, I could probably deal with things a little bit better myself.
Yeah.
You know, on the contrary to that, if people didn't know what, you know, their options are, if they didn't know
it's all unknown
who to call, or what is my boss going to think, or what happens to my wages, who's gonna take me to the physio, all that sort of stuff, then that's probably where things can potentially go wrong, or relationships could be severed, or we don't get great outcomes. So it's still a part of my role nowadays is to make sure that everybody's got the applicable information that's required of them.
That trait that you have of always looking forward and, you know, thinking ahead, and I'm sure it has some downsides in overthinking, but you know, but you're constantly doing that. I imagine in those situations with people that you work with, whether it's the client or the person who's injured, like that's pretty helpful. Yeah,
it is. I guess when you do it for a while, you kind of understand the outcomes, the most likely outcome. You know, it could be the worker returns back on a full, you know, capacity for work. It could be they're not. They're going down to work cover. They've got a lawyer involved. It can be a bit more litigious, which, you know, is again something that we have to manage. That's fine. Or it could be, you know, they're not going to be able to go back to their role because of a medical reason. And I guess as time goes by and you get some runs under the board from start to finish, you have a bit of an idea about what potentially are the options. So that can help you forecast what this might look like. When might this be wrapped up? When can we get them back to work if that's where the case will go.
Yeah, but like I'd imagine with that sort of stuff, it's just, there's someone on the end of the phone or on a meeting or at a doctor's appointment that's sort of telling me this stuff, but like, who's this guy? You know, like you relating and understand where they're coming from and building trust by actually bringing things up that's on their mind. It's like, oh, this guy's giving me the information that I'm thinking about. Like, he's essentially reading my mind here. Like, okay, tick. Oh, he's done it again. Tick. Like that relationship that you're building through doing that, because there's so many things, and you could probably understand, and you're talking about injuries and how you've dealt with them. Like, you're in a pretty cool situation where you're dealing with people that are going through stuff, and you firsthand know from a sporting point of view what it's like to go through some serious injuries, right? And how you felt, how you dealt with it and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, whether you think about it or not, like I'd imagine a lot of that, building up that rapport and relationship with people helps you.
Exactly right. The way that I see it more so nowadays, and, you know, I've commenced a role where it's a little bit more senior, and, you know, I have people reporting through to me. The role entails, I guess, the way that I personally see it, a two-pronged approach. You know, you're a representative of an organisation now, and so it's 50% cost saving because we don't want to be running up our workers' compensation policy, but also it's 50% of putting the person first. And I think that's very important. And the way that I see it is that you can't have one without the other. If we're going to put all of our eggs in one basket and think about how much money we can save, I personally feel that's going to come at the detriment to the employee. You know? And so I often find in the majority of cases, one can't be without the other. And in my view, putting the people or the person first provides unrealized dividends in a number of different ways. People enjoy their job. People are relieved, like we've spoken about, from any external stresses. Like, it's a pretty stressful time. What do I do when I've just hurt myself at work?
Yeah.
You know, and they know that there's somebody from the employer, whether it be me or the team, who can help them and guide them through a process, and that they're protected financially and their job remains the same.
Yeah.
You don't think about those sort of stuff when you've hurt yourself straight away.
No.
So the way that I see it is you know, you really got to put people first, and a lot of good organisations are doing that, I feel.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, is like that, you know, 50% approach that you're saying, and that weight, and, you know, maybe the person first. Like, you know, you've worked in a number of different sort of companies within the mining industry, within insurance. Has that always been the case, that they see it and those values are aligned to what you feel?
It's definitely developing. Yeah. Some organisations do it better than others. You know, I can't go away from the fact that ultimately organisations need finances.
They need to make money. That's what they're there for.
Yeah, correct. We can't continually leak funds for no reason. So I understand that. But yeah, I guess with my background, my exposure to different injuries, I guess exposure to seeing what those dividends are in terms of reduction of lost time, reduction of psychosocial hazards, making sure that, you know, people are really enjoying their work. That's what's probably going to put money in the back pocket, in my view, in amongst a number of different things.
Well, probably might be a cynical thing for me to say, but you could imagine someone doing, you know, case management or injury management, and in senior roles, is that you're going to get more kudos from your employer if you save more money. Like, I could imagine that that's a driver, and that goes directly against maybe what is best for the person sometimes.
Possibly.
And it's just, I don't know, like there's a competing priority there, possibly, if that balance isn't there.
Correct. But I guess whilst this situation is great, it isn't always the case. If we put the person first, we give them the time of day, we provide them with a pathway to return to work, we help them navigate through the claims process, we give them options, they're going to come back to work probably sooner than if we didn't provide the support that's required. And because they're back to work sooner, that's where we're going to see those unrealized, savings, I guess.
No,
so that's why I mean, if you put the person first, you're going to get the other one.
Yeah. No, I like it. And, there's that element too of, if you didn't put the person first, you might have saved some money or some heartache from a business point of view. Well, is that going to, bite you in the ass in the next claim that they make because they're pissed off with you?
You could argue that for sure. You could argue that.
Yeah.
And, that's
an
sad.
Injury that comes out of nowhere that, stuff you.
So I guess my role now is making sure in this new role that I've undertaken is that, I want to make sure that we do have systems, procedures and processes to go, hey, if this happens, this is what we can do to get, our employees, safely back to work.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to, again, help us in save costs, minimize our exposure to hazards, minimize our lost time, which is obviously something that a lot of mining organisations strive for.
But importantly, put the person first.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because again, you can't have one without the other, in my view.
Yeah. That must be pretty cool to be in a situation now where you're developing processes and, strategies and approaches that, I'm sure you don't get your way with everything in regards to how it goes.
It can always be improved.
Yeah. But that must be nice to be able to do that and know that the impact that that will have on people in the future.
Yeah, I guess I'm fortunate in that I've had good leaders that have exposed me to that, that have given trust to me going, hey, this is what we need to do. And, that was a learning curve for me, those processes and procedures. That's something that I potentially didn't really learn when I was at school or in university. It was because I've had some really good bosses that said, hey, do you reckon you could have a go at this? We can do it together. So, I'm obviously carrying that skill set into, other opportunities that I've taken and putting that into practice.
Yeah. I just wondered too, like that technical side of things, you do all that sort of study and training on a technical approach and a lot about that. And I get that, like I said, your role's a little bit different to what you were studying, but it could be, relatable to anyone who's in a clinical setting, and treating people. But there's obviously the technical stuff that you learn, but all those interpersonal, all those approaches, how to have those difficult conversations, what are the priorities, what are the balances, how do I influence people to see it the way that I think it should be seen?
Yep.
Like none of that you get taught as such. But you could probably imagine in your situation now, that's a higher percentage of the technical side of things.
Yep. You're dealing with people is the common denominator in all of it. Unless, perhaps you're a organizational psychologist or something along those lines, you really don't learn a lot about the way people can react to changes you're trying to make or disputes you're trying to resolve, all whilst the person you're dealing with has probably just dealt with some sort of adverse, injury.
Yeah.
Which is difficult. So yeah, it's definitely a role that I really enjoy, and I think it's a role that I enjoy because I get to help people ultimately, and I can help people whilst contributing to the organisation in a positive way, that in creating a better workplace where people will always get injured, because that means if there's no injuries, that means that we're pretty much taken over by robots. But when they do, the support's there.
No, that's awesome. So you mentioned you had some good leaders along the way that sort of supported you. Like, why were they good?
Yeah, very fortunate, I guess. I've enjoyed working with some of the leaders just in the way that how they approach difficult situations, particularly in my earlier, days or my earlier stages of my career where I didn't really know what my strengths were. I didn't really know how I'd go in such a role that's quite labor intensive and, high pressure.
What was on your mind? It's just like, hey, I've got a job and I'm getting paid.
Yeah, that was the first box, right? Yeah. In a number, it's number of 18-year-olds or whatever.
It's about that surface.
That's what they need first before they start thinking about anything else. But I guess, I was thankful and lucky that I had a lot of people who put their own spin on the way that they work. And what I like to do is kind of understand, he approaches that situation quite calmly, or I've noticed that this person's a little bit more direct face to face, which tends to have a bit more of a better outcome. And this isn't something that's magic and I've just figured this solution. This is something that's everyone knows.
Yeah, you pick up on the way.
But that's, there's a number of different that I still think about to this day that I, think about when I approach, attending a meeting or dealing with somebody in a one-on-one fashion. I can still pull on those different skills, and that's something that I guess helped me when I was at the stage that I didn't even know if I was going to be any good at this when I first started out. Fast forward into maybe, I guess, a couple of other positions that I've held as an advisor. I really enjoyed working with leaders that bring me along for the ride. Like, I know that I might not necessarily have all the answers, or I'm being a part of something that I might, it might be a new experience or a new learning for me, but I've got a boss that knows that, or can trust that I'm going to do a good job, knows that I'm learning, but will be able to grasp the concept, and also, I guess, brings me along for the ride to be able to expose me to certain areas of the business or certain concepts or tasks or abilities that I can learn, really, if that makes sense.
How did they do that? Like, was that, just involving you in meetings and things like that? Or was that like, talking out loud what they're thinking about how they're going to approach things? Or is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, different leaders, I guess, portray that in different ways, but exposure to meetings, brokering relationships where I can be introduced to somebody who completes work in another different area of the business, which I could potentially learn about. Taking on more responsibilities, or even the simple matter of being asked what my opinion is before making a decision. Like, I think that's quite powerful. Now, whether or not that holds any weight to the decision, I think that personally is a good exercise that would help a team member feel like they're warranted and their decision or their opinion's valid. It's something that I, moving into the position where I am now, where I've got a direct report and a lot more responsibility compared to my previous role. It's something that I really want to do, is to
pass that on,
to pass that knowledge on that, those leaders have passed on to me. I think that's very important. If you don't do that, then you're not progressing, in my view, I guess, vocationally. And I don't expect the people that I work with to have all the answers. But if there is an opportunity where I could, I guess, broker that and assist, then I think that's what a good leader can do.
Are you worried that they're going to know more than you, or they're going to replace you though?
Not necessarily, no. I think one of my previous managers effectively said that their role's done if they've managed themselves out of the role. That's quite daunting to really think about. But ultimately, it's, to an extent, it's quite true. If you've got a well-oiled machine of a team that are efficient and high-performing, then...
And that can be hard too. Like, it's just like, okay, it's time, I'm busy, so I don't really have the time to organise and get Jarrad to come along and do all this and invest in time, but it's important.
It is.
And then secondly, it's like, okay, am I doing myself out of a job here? Like, this is great. So there's like those competing things in there, which sort of, part to play. But, it's the positives that brings, like, what has that done for you? Like, in regards to your roles and your relationships, like, you view them as good leaders, and you're passing that on to others and providing cool environments, right?
Yeah, not to mention the work that you're doing is probably done to a high standard, you'd like to think, because of the, the exposure and the opportunities that you provided, which in turn nurtures the employee that may be reporting through to you, in a sense that they're upskilling, they're doing their job, and it's potentially to a high degree because of the opportunities that they've been provided.
Yeah. What other things then, from a leadership point of view, like with your role that you're in now, not even necessarily if it's a direct report, but like the different stakeholders, like you've had that experience for some time of like dealing with people that you don't necessarily have authority over, but you've got to work with and influence and get outcomes from.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess a lot of my role at this point in time is potentially changing a few small things, or redefining injury management or streamlining the process, and that will in turn, potentially
ruffle some feathers, bit of change.
Yeah, change. Maybe it's never obviously intent to ruffle feathers. It's genuinely intended to make things easier. And that always isn't welcomed. That's something that people maybe struggle with. They struggle with change because processes and procedures are done in a certain way and they have for years, and that's just how it works. But ultimately, if I'm provided with a job to do and that's to facilitate this type of change, whatever that looks like, then that's something that myself as a leader have to be okay with. That there might be some pushback, there might be some differing opinions or ideas. It's very important as a leader to not disregard all of that. I think it's important to take that on. With all of that as well, I think it's very important to have your leader on board with what you're doing and the support. Yeah. I think that's very important too, because if you're going to be inhibiting all these sort of changes and etc., no matter how big or small they are, it needs to obviously have buy-in from people in higher leader positions than you or people at the top, which is obviously not where I'm at.
I imagine there's probably a little bit about legislation and how you will change processes and streamline things to make things easier. But is that pretty clear when you see something? Is it very much, hey, I've seen this work really well in other places, or hey, this works better here if it's done like this? Like, what are your sort of your mindset with that sort of stuff?
Injury management's quite broad, but it is, as we've spoken about, bound to legislation. And whether or not one way is better than the other, sometimes the only way is to follow the legislation. And, there's a number of different subcategories with that, whether it be private and sensitive information, the way that organisations handle that. Yeah. Now, we can't choose how we handle that. We can't choose who we send information or receive information to. We legitimately have to follow due process, which is set, within the Act. So
those things are pretty easy to sort of get across the line.
Effectively. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that people will always follow them. Yeah. Which is something. Which is something that
Yeah, we're all guilty. That's over the top. That what do we need to do that for?
Yeah.
Whether that's road rules or whether that's legislation.
For sure, and every organisation is different, and every organisation holds that in a different priority.
We've done it this way forever. We've been fine. What's the issue now? Yeah.
Exactly right. So that's a pretty clear-cut one. But who's involved at what stage of an injury? Who gets what information? Who makes the phone call, who organises this, that and the other? That's probably got a little bit more flexibility depending on what resources you have. Do you have people out at the work site? Do you have people in the office that, have, a contact for a doctor's surgery? Those sorts of questions is probably, or those sorts of answers probably define the way that things are managed. But if you're, dealing with similar scale organisations in similar industries, typically it should be the same.
Yeah.
I won't say either which way because I don't know all of everybody's injury management system, but can only speak on the ones that I've worked within.
Yeah. Have you found that injury management, like anything else, like having you've got a pretty clear, this is how I would like to operate, and this is my 50% on the person and 50% on what the business needs, and the person comes first in particular situations around that, and I'm very mindful of that. But have you sort of found within injury management teams is okay, well, this is our goal, this is our mission statement, this is what we stand for? Do you guys have those clear outline things, or is that something that you probably see as a bit of a opportunity area?
Yeah, absolutely. We do have these to a certain extent. I am mindful of getting too caught up in statistics and numbers, and the reason why I say that, and I don't think it's the best metric, is because you can't control injuries. You can't choose when they're going to happen. You can't choose how or what sort of nature or how much, what surgery is going to cost for what injury. And if we got too stuck in how much we're spending or how many people we're hurting, I'd like to say too much stuck in it. I mean, it's an important statistic, but if you try and hedge it on things like KPIs and whatnot, it can be a little bit difficult because there are some things within an injury that you simply just couldn't have controlled.
Yeah.
So you need to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
Control, possibly not. Prevent, maybe.
That would be more the health and safety teams really work with that.
Definitely.
But once you guys get it, you've inherited, so to speak.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So we're, one could say it towards the end
of the
line. Yep. So, prevention, awareness, injury, and then management.
Okay. Yeah. Do you get a lot of say in the prevention and working with safety teams on that? Like, is injury?
We fall under the health and safety team, which I think's appropriate.
Yeah.
We report certain metrics to the safety team and head of safety as well, which they report obviously up the stream. And I think it's fantastic. I love to see injury management being reported at board level because it's important. This is what we're doing for our people. In turn, this is potentially what we might be saving, and those two sort of statistics indirectly show how good your injury management system is.
Yeah.
Again, it always comes with a little bit of a caveat that you can't control everything, or you can't control people.
Yeah.
We've ultimately got people on our work sites, which, is a little bit more riskier than having a robot. So yeah, there's an element to that as well. But if we were to report on, those types of things to the board, I think it's great.
Yeah. You see some, over your time, I imagine you've seen some probably pretty full-on injuries that have happened in the workplace.
Sad. Very sad.
Yeah. And then hearing the impact that has on people's lives, like it's one thing to hear about someone's, done something or something's happened to them.
Yeah.
And then actually hear it in their voice, how they're coping with it. Like that's
exactly right.
You were saying about switching off and things like that. Like, is that hard to not think about that?
It is.
People and what they're going through?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it's hard as well for me because I've kind of, to a certain degree, I've had my own injuries.
You know what it feels like.
Possibly not on the scale as some of the ones I've dealt with, but, ultimately it's been some form of adversity. And so, yeah, I understand, I guess, to a degree that it's a difficult time. I think everybody probably can. Switch off, yes, but ultimately there's still a responsibility there to be there for our people. And I think that's something that a good injury management spokesperson should keep in front of their mind.
Yeah.
If it means picking up the phone when you don't need to, I think whilst it's not a requirement, I think it's
goes a long way.
Does go a long way.
Yeah. Do you get to a point there with some of the processes that you work through that you'll have so it's too full on, but checklists on how I imagine okay, well, from a legislation point of view, we need to do this at this time. We need to have this for this reason and so on and so forth. But those little things, is that just something that you have in your mind and that you do, or, or is that just okay, well, things that we should have down there? Because it does, if we're talking 50% about the person and 50% about what business legislation needs, well, okay, well, shouldn't we have some lists there?
Yeah,
for that,
absolutely. I mean, look, that's something that a lot of organisations standardise, a flow chart sort of process with what happens and who does what with respect to when an injury occurs. I think that's great for, things like employee turnover. If there's, somebody else that needs to join the team, they can pick up a guideline or a procedure and go, okay, this is what we need to do now that this injury has occurred. I guess there's not too much placed on, level of contact with an employee or I guess well-being check-in. That's something that's, I guess I don't want to say that it's not there because it is.
Well, what department does that come from?
Probably people and culture, but also the injury management team. I think I operate in the sense that I'll call somebody and irrespective of their injury, I'd like to ask how they're going.
Yeah. Well, Carl Harding and the work he does, and it's come up on an episode that we've had just about the well-being stuff that he does with athletes and how that works. And it then came up in an episode with James Miller about, people and capability teams and human resources teams, and about that shift a little bit in bigger organizations, particularly around, the advocacy for the person, or more on what the business strategically needs.
Sure.
And then bigger businesses not necessarily having a well-being department as such, where does that fall? And it's like, okay, well, if I've got a personality that, sees the value in that, great. But if I don't have a personality that sees the value in that position, well, then what happens? Who deals with it?
Correct. I think it's invaluable. I think a well-being team is worth its weight in gold. I've sat in a well-being team being the injury management guy, and I can see that they're hand in hand in what they do. It is something that needs to come from the top. I think you've kind of alluded to the importance of having, I guess, a leadership team, or whether that be a board or a group manager or whatever, having well-being or health and well-being as a priority. Because again, like we spoke at the very start of this podcast, is that you got to put the person first. And if you don't put the person first, you're going to be paying for it in other ways.
Well, there's that thread that keeps coming up with you around, how you do things and not necessarily what you do, whether what profession you're choosing, how you go about playing sport. Like there's and again, this sort of stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how important that is. Just on that, like mental health side of things, like with legislation, like does that get covered in that? Like,
yeah, it's definitely a new topic that's probably in its infancy, and that's being introduced through, in this case, Department of Mines. There's a big focus now on the impact of psychosocial safety in the workplace, and I guess the identification of psychosocial hazards. There's a code of practice which identifies a number of different ones.
Okay.
A couple being, fatigue, burnout, lack of support, lack of role clarity, poor organisational management, and then you got things like violence, discrimination, misconduct, etc. So I guess the good thing is these hazards, are standardised in a code of practice, and so the person conducting the business must now actively work or show that they're working to eliminate or minimise these risks. Procedural risk management procedures, all sorts of stuff that a number of different companies are looking to implement and roll out. Again, it's still probably early stages, and I've worked with a lot of people that are probably a little bit more specialised in it than I am. Yeah. But I can only see it as something great, and it's probably something that's incredibly needed. It's put under the microscope by the Department of Mines, and I think that's great.
Yeah, and you find that that's starting to seep over like in the injury management stuff and how you deal with cases.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think there's in my experience, there's been injuries that potentially could have been prevented through, I guess, a mitigation or elimination of psychosocial risk. People typically wouldn't have a certain feeling or a certain thought in their mind, or I guess a mental health outcome. Yeah, mental health outcome, which has resulted in potentially one of the risks that I've just mentioned. So yeah, if we're looking actively to reduce or mitigate or eliminate these risks, then I'd like to think that there'd be some sort of reduction in these forms of mental outcomes or mental injuries or illnesses.
Yeah, and you've enjoyed your time in the mining sort of
area?
I
do. I really enjoy. Look, I haven't come from a technical background, so it does interest me in learning new concepts or effectively how things work.
Yeah. Okay.
Mineral processing, commodity pricing, types of deposits. Obviously something that I'm in no way an expert in, but it's something that I could potentially learn about because I'm fairly close to it. So it is a enjoyable industry to work for, and it's a critical role in the Australian economy. Western Australian mining. This stems to employment opportunities, foreign investment, government revenue that can be put into different areas of the state to improve make things better. So yeah, I think it's interesting. Even though, you know, I might not actively be at the coalface, it's something that it's
you're exposed to the lingo and everything that goes around.
Yeah, exactly right. It's something that I can obviously learn about, and that's something that I value for sure.
Why is everyone not happy today? Oh, the bloody, you know, that your price has gone down. It's like, oh, okay.
That's something that I can't forecast on, unfortunately. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't be sitting here.
You know, sporting background, you're still competing. You know, your early 30s. Like, you know, why?
Yeah, I do get that question a lot from family members and whatnot. I guess, you know, and I think we've spoken about this from time to time, Greenie, is that, you know, irrespective of the level that I play, I know that I'm not a professional athlete, or I'm not earning big money playing in a competition that I am. I really enjoy the ability to catch up with mates, to have an outlet, to strive in being better than last week, to, you know, reap the benefits of being physically healthy and training and all the, you know, the attributes that people can develop from just having that
process.
Yeah, there's a social side to it, which is great. I think that's, you know, it's a tricky one, right? Because again, I'm 30 now, and I am, you know, I've had a few injuries, and there's probably a bit of a shelf life now. But I think when I think about people telling me just to give it up or put it away or whatever, I think, well, what sort of person would I be without all those things that I can access 3 times a week? You know, and that's as far as I get. I don't know. I got no idea. So again, I don't see myself as a player that's going to play till he's 50. I definitely think that I'm probably on the other side of the hill. But the reason why I do associate with these types of, you know, sporting clubs and whatnot is because it gives you a sense of purpose. It literally gets me up in the morning. It makes me...
Gets you to the gym.
Yeah, it gets me to the gym. It realizes, you know, it makes me think, okay, well, if I don't do this, then I'm probably not going to be doing what I can do on a Saturday. And every player thinks that way too. And, you know, that's part and parcel of playing sport. You have to hone in on your skills and improve, etc. Yeah, exactly. It gives you discipline and structure. And that's something that, you know, like a lot of people, I strive on. I really enjoy that.
Yeah. And probably natural too, like, you know, loved ones seeing you get injured and, you know, and seeing those negatives and maybe not as clearly seeing the positives you've just articulated.
Yeah,
right?
look,
and
I mean,
understandable, right?
Well, the positives that I see, you can't really see them, right? They're not in front of you. You can't pick them up. It's just how you feel. But yeah, you can possibly see me on a hospital bed or at the doctor's again, or, you know, on with an ice pack on my knee or something like
really
that, right?
Yeah,
you sure? So yeah, look, it's definitely a fine line. I'm definitely not the sort of person to do anything silly and disregard my health and whatnot. But I do hold significant value in the, you know, tangible things that being a member of a sporting team or a performing team gives me, and how that makes me feel.
Quite obvious, right? Is that you don't play sport to get injured and be laying in a hospital bed in a neck brace, right? Like, that's not the goal. There's obviously got to be some things that, you know, put you into that situation that are positive, that make you want to continue on the back of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Or, you know, knowing that, you know, I've had a couple of knee surgeries, I've done this. Yeah, I'm not going to be a professional athlete. Well, why am I acting like a professional athlete? How you do things comes up again, right?
Yeah, I just can't help but feel, you know, and it's easy, I guess, to say now, but it's the age old adage of, what do I want to think 10, 20 years from now about today? Do I think, oh man, I was feeling pretty good that year, but I didn't play because I was worried about my knee, or I was worried about something that potentially may or may not have happened. So do you go down that train of thought and just give that away because of potentially something that could happen? Or do you hit 15, 20 years going, geez, yeah, my back's a bit sore, or I've got a dodgy knee or whatever. But man, those years, remember that. Like I'm gonna catch up with Greenie for a beer and talk about that game we played. So it's a tricky one, right? Yeah. So and I'm just, I don't have the answer to it. Yeah. But that's kind of the line of thought that I have when I think about when people go, why don't you just give it away?
Leadership styles between the two areas, work life and sport?
Yeah, quite transitional. A lot of leadership becomes involved when following injury or, an event occurring at work. And we don't have a lot of days to, plan or fix or amend, processes after an injury occurs. It's a lot of crisis management. It's making sure the injured employee or person is looked after, and whether that be flown off site and getting the critical care that they need, or facilitating transport, or whatever that looks like. You need to organise that now. You need to organise that as soon as it happens. So that incurs critical thinking, a lot of decisions made pretty quickly, a lot of phone calls and consultation with people. A lot of sort of skills that can be transitional into sport and to any really performing teams. I look at a rugby league team or an AFL team or a soccer team that's during the season, where realistically, if you play on a Saturday or a Sunday and things didn't turn out the way that they wanted, you only have, you have a little bit more than maybe an injury occurring on a work site, but you only have 1.5 to 2 days. If you're a person of interest like a captain or a coach, you don't have a lot of time in the grand scheme of things to fix things, make changes, make decisions that maybe not everybody agrees with, dealing with people, dealing with emotions, dealing with maybe a playing group that aren't all on the same page. You got to take that all into account, and you need to methodically make the decision and critically think and I guess operate on a small amount of time with a high level of pressure. So same but different in my mind. I think they're a little bit transitional.
Well, injury management, you could argue, is probably a bit tougher in that. Like if you said that an injury was your game day, right? That's your setup.
Yep.
Well, in a sporting team, you've got a fixtures list that's planned. It's by increments for recovery. So every week we've got a game and we know the process, and it's just, we do week 1 and then week 2 we go and we've got time to fix stuff. Well, you could get an injury on day 1 and it's not going to happen again possibly on day 7 or dealing with it. You may have an injury on day 1 and day 2 on the same day. Where are my resources? The injuries on different days, but different milestones mean that you've got to split resources to deal with things at the same time.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, and managing all that, and then I suppose improving things. Like you said, fitting that in. Like, how do you do that from an injury management point of view?
Yeah, exactly right. And again, another comparison is that, you can, within a sporting team, you can do a pre-season, you can plan, you can run plays, you can educate, you can set plans and procedures in place to be executed on a game day.
It's an off-season.
Yeah, correct. But and you can do the same thing in injury management. You can standardise and ways of working and put procedures and et cetera in place, but you're still going to have to deal with adversity. You're still going to have to make sure that
but there's no off season.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. No, exactly right.
You're going all year round.
Yeah, there's people. There's especially with a lot of sites who work double shifts, night shift, day shift. It's 24/7 operations. So there's no downtime really, and an injury can happen at any time, and it can happen at any time. Simply because we're human.
Do you get a lot of time, outside of dealing with the reactive stuff of, an injury occurring and dealing with that, or, all the stuff that goes with that? Do you, proactively, getting out to different sites and being able to sort of, I suppose, build some relationship with some team that hopefully you'll never see or hear from, in an injury sense, but do you get much of an opportunity for that?
Yeah, I do, and I think it's incredibly important. Yeah. In a position like this one, the last thing that I need to be is somebody who's just on an email
a stranger,
or on a phone. You know, I need to be where the action is. I need to understand what people need, understand, you know, because who's going to tell me or my team that things can be improved? The best people that can tell me that are the people that are right there at the coalface, and that stuff's invaluable. It's all well and good for somebody to come in and say, we're doing this, this, and this, but it really has to be in consultation with the people that are actually doing the job.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredibly important. That's part of my role, to make sure that, you know, that relationship is being nurtured. And, you know, it honestly is to make sure that, is there a way that we can support and make this system or this situation or this procedure better for you?
Yeah.
So yeah, you can't get that, I think, from just an email trail or a phone call.
Yeah.
It's understanding how people work, what are some of the pain points, and how can we resolve them.
Pretty rewarding, like helping people through like a situation when they're injured.
Yeah, ultimately, that's the ultimate goal, Greenie. And I think
that's why you do it.
Yeah, that's probably one of the major things that I enjoy. You know, I've sat in the hospital bed, and you know, I've had, as we've said a couple of times, a few injuries, and I can understand the physical and emotional turmoil that can encompass. A lot of people that I've played with and against have had the same sort of feeling too. So I really, on the other side of the coin, I understand how good it feels to recover. And that's something that makes me feel a sense of reward in getting people back to work. And for me, you know, the way that I was brought up in through my father is that working is just something that you just do. It's a big part of you. It's non-negotiable. It's 100% correct. And, you know, when you take somebody's ability to work away, it honestly can sometimes feel like you're taking away about 50% of them.
Yeah.
So I guess to be able to bridge that gap and to help people get back to doing what they were doing and making them feel that like they're, you know, actively contributing employees, it's incredibly rewarding. And, you know, and
being able to provide for their family and
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And the some of the best phone calls that I get are the ones where I got that news from a certain individual who said, look, thanks for your help.
Yeah.
I'm going back to site on Tuesday. It'll be my first swing back. I appreciate it.
Yeah. It must be lovely.
It is. And look, I'm the first one to say that it's a real difficult and constricting act or legislation that these workers need to be confined to. It can be frustrating. They've got to deal with a lot of people. They've got to potentially deal with people not calling them or not holding up their end of the bargain, which can be very difficult and frustrating, and I guess add to an already emotionally stimulated person who's just hurt themselves. So if I can do anything to kind of bridge that gap and offer assistance to this person in whatever way it is, whether it be just giving them with some options or checking in or just saying, hey, my name's Jarrad, I'm the injury management superintendent. If you need anything, just give me a call. This is my work number.
Yeah.
That's something that I love doing, and you know, it often indirectly solves, I guess, a little bit of angst and potentially some problems, because people know that, okay, if something happens, I can just call this number and there potentially could be a plan on the other end of it.
Yeah. No, I reckon you're a perfect man, like with your history with injuries, and not just the injuries that you've had, which you've had your fair share, that's for sure. But, you know, around that sporting environment, the amount of injuries that you're around, you know, like there's another, you know, 17 Jarrad Smiths that are going through things on a particular team on a different week, right? And, you know, seeing how that affects them and seeing and understanding the different injuries that pop up and how they get through it and recover from them.
It's difficult, and they all have their own merits.
And people deal with them in different ways.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. And, you know, it's even more an importance to make sure that you're more than just a voice through the phone. You're actually providing assistance, and you're providing, I guess, an outlet to these people who are going through a really difficult time.
Yeah, I think a fair apprenticeship, mate, from an injury standpoint of view, to get to where you're at now. And, you know, like the stuff too with, you know, case management and, you know, the technical side of things with the exercise physiology and sports science, like it's all pretty good, and probably speaks to that power of what you were saying around, just following a passion or something that interests you, and not necessarily, deciding on a profession or an occupation and see where it takes you. And it's taken you to something that there's so many links.
Yeah.
And with your personality too, about thinking ahead and moving forward and putting yourself in other people's shoes and empathy for the person that's going through stuff. Like, makes a heap of sense, mate, while you're doing what you're doing. And I'm sure you add a lot of value. So appreciate you sharing it all, mate. And,
thanks.
And going through it. I know it's not necessarily your cup of tea, and I've probably twisted your arm a little bit, but I really appreciate you, giving it the time. Some cool stuff that you've spoken about.
Thanks, Greenie. I've really enjoyed it. It's, in the lead up to the podcast, I must admit, I did say to you, look, do you really want me to talk about what I do? It's not that interesting, but look, if I can, I guess, create some sort of exposure in, the work that either myself or the industry or my team members do, and with ultimately a goal to help people, that's a tick in my box, and I've really enjoyed today, and hopefully people.
I don't think you can discount the importance of helping people get through some difficult times, and particularly when they're injured at work. So no, I think that's I know I was very interested to talk to you about it, and again, the biggest thing I love about doing this sort of stuff is just I've known you for a long time, and known you since you're a 14 or 15-year-old kid, right? And seeing you get to a point of where you're at now and what you're providing and what you're leading is super cool to see, mate. So interested to hear about it all. So appreciate it.